Nestled on the outskirts of a bustling city, the neighborhood of Maple Grove is a picturesque community characterized by its tree-lined streets, charming homes, and a strong sense of camaraderie among residents. From the moment you enter the neighborhood, you're welcomed by vibrant gardens blooming with seasonal flowers and meticulously maintained lawns that reflect the pride of its homeowners. Each house, with its unique architectural style, contributes to the area's quaint charm, creating an inviting atmosphere that feels both warm and safe. At the heart of Maple Grove is the Homeowners Association, or HOA, which plays a pivotal role in maintaining the community's standards. Founded years ago by a group of passionate residents dedicated to preserving the neighborhood's aesthetic and fostering a sense of belonging, the HOA establishes guidelines that govern everything from property appearance to noise levels. While many residents appreciate these regulations as necessary for ensuring a cohesive environment, others sometimes find them stifling or intrusive. The HOA hosts regular meetings to discuss community issues, plan events, and enforce rules. They are responsible for organizing seasonal festivities like summer barbecues and holiday decorating contests, which help strengthen bonds among neighbors. However, their authority can also lead to tensions when enforcement becomes overly strict or when residents feel their personal freedoms are being compromised. As such, the HOA has garnered mixed feelings among residents. Some admire its commitment to upholding community standards while others view it as an overreaching body that's quick to impose penalties for minor infractions. One such incident would soon set off a chain reaction that would unravel the very fabric of authority within this seemingly idyllic neighborhood. For many years, I had been a quiet participant in this community, attending meetings, joining in celebrations, and generally staying out of the spotlight. But little did anyone know that I held a secret that would soon change everything. As I navigated through my daily life, working from home and enjoying the tranquility of my surroundings, I never anticipated that my relationship with the HOA would spiral into confrontation. This was not just any neighborhood, it was my neighborhood, a place where I had invested not only my finances but also my heart and soul. And as tensions simmered beneath the surface, I would soon find myself at the center of an unexpected showdown that would reveal my true connection to Maple Grove. The incident that would ignite the conflict between me and the Homeowners Association began quite innocuously. It was an unremarkable Wednesday afternoon when I returned home from running errands. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed a couple of neighbors chatting on the sidewalk, their voices rising in concern as they pointed toward my car. I hadn't given it much thought at the time. After all, my car was simply parked where it always was, right in front of my own house. However, it wasn't long before I received a formal notice from the HOA. The letter, printed on crisp white paper adorned with the association's logo, outlined several alleged infractions regarding my vehicle. The HOA claimed that my car, an older sedan that had served me well for years, was in violation of their stringent rules regarding vehicle appearances and parking standards. They accused me of having an unsightly vehicle that detracted from the neighborhood's aesthetic appeal, a charge that felt utterly absurd to me. As I read through the notice, I found myself incredulous. My car was far from perfect. It had its share of scratches and dings, but it was functional and reliable. I had seen plenty of vehicles in our community that were not only older but also in worse condition than mine. Yet here I was, singled out for scrutiny while others seemed to skate by without consequence. The letter went on to state that if I didn't address these so-called violations within a week, they would pursue further action, potentially including impounding my car. Feeling both frustrated and targeted, I decided to attend the next HOA meeting to address this issue head-on. As I prepared for the confrontation, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't merely about a car. It felt like an intrusion into my personal space and autonomy as a homeowner. On the day of the meeting, tensions ran high as residents gathered to discuss various community matters. When it was finally my turn to speak, I addressed both the board members and my fellow neighbors directly. I expressed how I felt about being unfairly singled out and questioned whether the HOA really upheld its mission of fostering community spirit or if it simply thrived on enforcing arbitrary rules. Just as I thought things couldn't get any worse, one of the board members stood up to announce that they would dispatch a towing service to impound my car unless immediate action was taken to rectify its appearance. The room went silent as shocked murmurs spread among my neighbors. Little did anyone know that this incident would escalate far beyond a simple dispute over a vehicle. The following day, I arrived home to find a towing truck parked ominously in front of my house. My heart raced as I approached the scene, adrenaline surging through me. Standing beside the truck were two HOA representatives, their expressions a mix of satisfaction and authority. They had come prepared to enforce their decision, and I was determined not to back down without a fight. "Good afternoon," one of them greeted me with a condescending smile. "We're here to remove this vehicle as per the HOA's instructions." I felt an intense wave of anger wash over me. "You can't be serious," I shot back, my voice steady but laced with frustration. "This is my car, parked legally on my property. What kind of authority do you think you have to just take it away?" The representative adjusted his glasses, clearly enjoying the confrontation. "We have the authority granted by the HOA bylaws," he replied, his tone dripping with arrogance. "Your vehicle doesn't meet our community standards, and we've given you ample warning." "Ample warning?" I retorted, incredulous. "You mean that ridiculous letter? You're targeting me for having an older car while ignoring far worse violations in our neighborhood. This is harassment." Emotions swirled around us like a storm. Neighbors began to gather, drawn by the commotion, their expressions reflecting shock and curiosity as they bore witness to this escalating drama. I could sense the tension in the air, whispers and murmurs rippled through the crowd as they processed what was happening. One of the other HOA members stepped forward, his arms crossed defensively. "This isn't personal," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "It's about maintaining our community's image." "Maintaining an image?" I scoffed. "You're more concerned about appearances than about actual community spirit. This is about people, not plastic perfection." My voice rose with each word, fueled by frustration and a desire to defend not just my rights but those of all residents who felt oppressed by the HOA's heavy-handed tactics. The tension reached a boiling point as my neighbors began to voice their opinions, some siding with me while others hesitated, unsure of where to stand. "This is ridiculous," shouted one neighbor from the back of the crowd. "We can't let them run roughshod over us." In that moment, clarity washed over me. It wasn't just about my car anymore, it was about standing up for what was right in our community. As I glared defiantly at the HOA representatives, I knew that this confrontation would change everything and that they would soon realize they had underestimated not just me but the collective power of our neighborhood. As the tension between me and the HOA representatives escalated, I realized this was the perfect moment to unveil a secret that would change everything. Taking a deep breath, I decided it was time to reveal my true connection to this neighborhood, a revelation that would turn the tide of this confrontation. "I think it's time you all know something," I began, my voice steady and resolute. The crowd quieted, eager to hear what I had to say. "I am not just another homeowner in Maple Grove, I own the entire neighborhood." A wave of disbelief rippled through the gathering of neighbors and HOA representatives alike. The expressions on their faces shifted from arrogance to confusion, and I could see a few people exchanging shocked glances. I continued, "Every house, every piece of land you see here, it's all part of an investment I made years ago when the neighborhood was still in its early stages. When I bought my home, I purchased the rights to the whole development." I could feel a mixture of surprise and intrigue radiating from the crowd as they processed my words. "You see," I explained, "when I invested in this community, I didn't just buy a house. I bought into a vision, one where residents could come together in harmony rather than under the oppressive thumb of an overreaching HOA." The HOA representatives shifted uncomfortably, their earlier confidence fading as they began to grasp the implications of what I was saying. "You're joking?" one of them stammered, clearly thrown off balance. "No joke," I replied firmly. "I've held on to every deed and document since day one. And yes, that includes ownership of the HOA itself. It's time you realize that your authority over me is non-existent." The atmosphere crackled with disbelief as neighbors whispered among themselves, processing this unexpected twist. Some looked at me with newfound respect, while others seemed grappling with confusion about how someone they thought was just an ordinary resident could hold such power. I went on to explain how my ownership allowed me to shape our community's future. "This isn't about cars or appearances, this is about creating a place where we all feel welcome, where everyone has a voice." As realization dawned on those present, I saw expressions shift from concern to solidarity. The energy in the air transformed from tension and conflict to something more hopeful, a sense of empowerment among my neighbors. With my ownership unveiled, it became clear that this confrontation was not just a battle for my car, it was a pivotal moment for the entire neighborhood. A chance for us all to reclaim our community from the constraints that had been imposed upon us by a small group. The fight for Maple Grove had only just begun. To fully understand the implications of my ownership of the entire neighborhood, it's crucial to delve into the legal framework surrounding property ownership and homeowners associations. When I first purchased my home in Maple Grove, I didn't just buy a piece of real estate, I entered into a complex web of property rights tied to the neighborhood's governance structure. In many residential communities, HOAs are formed to manage common areas and enforce community standards often outlined in a governing document known as the Declaration of Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions (CCRs). These documents specify the rules that homeowners must follow, including those concerning property maintenance, architectural guidelines, and even vehicle regulations. While these rules are intended to preserve the neighborhood's aesthetic appeal and property values, they can sometimes lead to conflicts over interpretation and enforcement. When I initially bought my home, I was aware of the HOA's existence but found it reasonable compared to others I had encountered. However, as I became more involved with community affairs, I discovered that the HOA had not only been established to uphold standards but also held significant control over residents' daily lives. What many people didn't realize was that when I purchased my property, I acquired more than just a house. I also secured a percentage of ownership in the HOA itself. This unique arrangement stemmed from a development model that allowed early investors to have a say in governance. My investment included not just my home but also shares in the overall community infrastructure. This meant that as one of the earliest homeowners, I had significant voting power and rights within the HOA framework. As time went on, I accumulated additional properties as investments throughout the neighborhood, further solidifying my status as the principal owner. The implications of this ownership were profound. Not only did this give me legal authority over decisions made by the HOA, but it also positioned me as a key player in shaping community policies. In essence, I was not merely subjected to the whims of an association, I had the ability to influence its direction. This knowledge became even more significant during confrontations like the one with the towing service. The HOA representatives may have believed they wielded power over me through their enforcement actions, but in reality, my ownership status undermined their authority. Understanding this legal context shifted everything. It transformed my role from a beleaguered homeowner into a guardian of my community's future, someone who could advocate for change and challenge unjust practices. The fight for Maple Grove was no longer just about my car, it was about reclaiming our neighborhood from an entity that had forgotten its purpose. With this new realization fueling me and my neighbors, we stood ready to redefine our community together. In the wake of the confrontation with the HOA representatives, a palpable shift occurred within the neighborhood. The incidents surrounding my car had ignited a spark of discontent among residents, many of whom had felt increasingly frustrated by the HOA's overreach. It wasn't long before a town hall meeting was called to address the growing concerns and grievances regarding the association's actions. The meeting was scheduled for that Friday evening at the community center, and as I arrived, I could see that the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Neighbors filed into the room, their expressions a mix of curiosity and determination. Chairs filled quickly, and soon the room was buzzing with conversations about the events that had transpired just days earlier. As I took my seat at the front, I couldn't help but feel a sense of responsibility. The community was coming together not only to discuss my situation but to confront a larger issue, the way the HOA had been operating without sufficient accountability. When the meeting officially began, it was clear that people were ready to voice their concerns. The HOA board members were present, their demeanor noticeably defensive as they faced an audience eager for answers. One member attempted to open the meeting with a prepared statement about maintaining community standards and enforcing rules. However, he was quickly interrupted by a chorus of voices expressing frustration over selective enforcement and perceived favoritism. "Why are we allowing our community to be governed by fear?" one neighbor shouted, echoing sentiments shared by many in attendance. "We pay good money for these homes, and yet we're treated like we don't matter." I seized this moment and stood up to speak. "What happened to me is just a symptom of a much larger problem," I said, my voice steady. "This isn't about my car, it's about all of us feeling like we can't live freely in our own homes. We need to reclaim our community from an organization that has forgotten its purpose." The audience erupted in applause, and I could see heads nodding in agreement. The tide had turned, residents who once felt powerless now found their voices united under a common cause. From that point on, discussions flowed freely as neighbors shared their own experiences with HOA enforcement, stories of arbitrary fines, confusing regulations, and a lack of transparency. The tension in the room transformed into a collective determination to reshape our neighborhood's governance. By the end of the meeting, it became clear that we would not tolerate being sidelined any longer. A committee was proposed to review HOA practices and ensure that every resident had a say in how our community was managed. As I looked around at my neighbors, some old friends and some new faces, I felt an exhilarating sense of hope. Together, we were standing up for our rights as homeowners, ready to challenge an authority that had been misused for too long. The journey ahead would be challenging, but in that moment, united by purpose, we were ready to reclaim Maple Grove as our home once again. As the town hall meeting concluded, the atmosphere was charged with a sense of empowerment. Neighbors gathered in small groups, animatedly discussing the events of the evening and what it meant for our community moving forward. I could sense a shift in their perceptions, not just toward the HOA but also toward me. What had started as a confrontation about my car had evolved into something much larger, and I was at the center of it all. In the days following the meeting, reactions from my neighbors varied widely. Some approached me with disbelief, struggling to comprehend how someone they had seen as an ordinary resident could wield such significant power. "I never knew you owned the neighborhood," said Karen, who lived 2 doors down. Her surprise was palpable and she seemed genuinely taken aback. "How did you keep that a secret?" I explained how my ownership had been a strategic investment made with a vision for the future of Maple Grove. As I spoke, I could see her admiration growing. "You've got to help us take back control," she urged, her enthusiasm infectious. It was clear that many residents were eager to rally behind someone who not only understood their frustrations but also had the ability to enact change. Others expressed outright admiration for my willingness to stand up against the HOA's authority. "You're brave for doing what you did," said Mark, a longtime resident who had often been one of the HOA's most vocal critics. "It takes guts to confront them like that." His words resonated deeply, and I felt a swell of pride knowing that my actions were inspiring others to find their courage as well. However, not everyone was immediately supportive. A few neighbors remained skeptical, questioning whether my ownership would truly lead to positive changes or if it would complicate things further. "Are you sure you want this responsibility?" one neighbor asked cautiously during a casual chat outside my house. "What if it makes things worse?" Their concerns were valid, reflecting the uncertainty that often accompanies change. Despite this skepticism, many began to see me not just as a neighbor but as a leader, someone willing to fight for our community's rights. The more we discussed plans for reforming the HOA, the more people stepped forward to volunteer their time and ideas. The energy in Maple Grove shifted from one of fear and compliance to one of collaboration and hope. As I walked through the neighborhood in those days after the town hall meeting, I felt different too. Neighbors waved at me with renewed warmth, some even stopping to chat about their own frustrations with the HOA. It became clear that we were no longer just individuals living in proximity. We were becoming a united front against an organization that had lost sight of its purpose. The journey ahead wouldn't be without obstacles, but together we were ready to reclaim our community, one small step at a time. I realized that what began with an attempted impoundment had sparked something profound, a collective awakening among my neighbors that empowered us all to advocate for our shared home. In the days following the town hall meeting, it became clear that the HOA was feeling the pressure from the tide of community support that had surged behind me. The revelation of my ownership stung them deeply, and their initial confidence began to wane. It wasn't long before they reached out, eager to negotiate and mitigate the situation. The first response came in the form of a formal letter which arrived in my mailbox just a few days later. The tone was conciliatory, almost apologetic. They acknowledged the strong feelings expressed by residents at the meeting and suggested a private meeting to discuss better aligning HOA policies with community values. The letter felt like a thinly veiled attempt to regain control over the narrative that had spun out of their grasp. I accepted their invitation for a meeting, curious to see how they would approach the situation now that I had revealed my authority. When I arrived at the HOA office, the board members were unusually cordial, their smiles tight with an edge of desperation. They wanted to project an image of cooperation, but I could sense their underlying discomfort. "Thank you for coming," said the HOA president, trying to strike a friendly tone. "We understand there have been some misunderstandings lately, and we'd like to find ways to improve communication moving forward." I listened carefully as they proposed various changes, modifications to enforcement practices, and promises of increased transparency regarding decisions affecting residents. However, it was evident that their motivations were rooted in damage control rather than genuine concern for community well-being. As we discussed potential changes, I made it clear that any negotiations would need to include active involvement from residents, not just top-down directives from the board. This was a key point I reiterated, emphasizing that I would not accept any proposals unless they reflected the interests of everyone living in Maple Grove. The power dynamics shifted during this meeting. I could see it in their eyes as they realized that they no longer held unchecked authority. The board members were now negotiating from a position of vulnerability, grappling with the fact that their decisions could significantly impact their standing within the community. Despite their attempts at diplomacy, I sensed they were still reluctant to relinquish control entirely. The HOA representatives tried to downplay my ownership, suggesting that my role was just as a homeowner among many. But with every point I raised about community engagement and shared governance, it became increasingly clear that their narrative was crumbling. As our discussions continued over the following weeks, I remained steadfast in advocating for a more equitable system, a shift toward collective decision-making where all voices counted equally. This new approach resonated with many residents and forced the HOA to confront its previous practices. While they may have initially viewed me as a nuisance or an obstacle, it was becoming evident that I was now seen as a leader committed to fostering positive change in Maple Grove. A transformation that would ultimately redefine not only our neighborhood but also the very nature of how we governed ourselves together. The fallout from the confrontation with the HOA rippled through our community in ways I had never anticipated. As the dust settled from the attempted impoundment of my car and the subsequent town hall meeting, relationships among residents began to shift dramatically. Some neighbors who had previously maintained a low profile found their voices, while others revealed divisions that had long simmered beneath the surface. For many residents, my stand against the HOA sparked a newfound sense of empowerment. People who had once felt powerless began to engage more actively in discussions about community governance. They started reaching out to one another, forming alliances based on shared grievances and a collective desire for change. Neighbors who had previously only exchanged pleasantries in passing now gathered in small groups to strategize how we could reshape our neighborhood together. However, not everyone embraced this wave of unity. The HOA's staunch supporters, those who believed in strict adherence to rules and regulations, began to draw lines in the sand. They felt threatened by the changes unfolding and worried about losing the control they believed was necessary for maintaining order within our community. Tensions rose as debates flared over issues like property appearances and enforcement practices. Some residents expressed concerns that loosening HOA regulations might lead to chaos or diminish property values. This division quickly became apparent at community gatherings. While many newcomers rallied behind me, calling for transparency and collaboration, others openly criticized what they perceived as a rebellion against established norms. Not everyone wants a free-for-all, one longtime resident remarked during a neighborhood barbecue, her voice tinged with frustration as she addressed those championing change. For me, this was a pivotal moment. I recognized that bridging these divides would be essential for creating a cohesive community. I reached out to both sides, inviting dialogues that would allow differing perspectives to be heard. I organized informal coffee chats where residents could share their concerns and hopes for Maple Grove's future without judgment. Slowly but surely, these conversations began to break down barriers. Through these discussions, it became clear that many residents shared common goals despite their differing views on how to achieve them. Everyone wanted a thriving neighborhood where they felt safe and valued. It was just a matter of finding common ground on how to get there. As time went on, alliances formed not solely based on agreement but also on respect for diverse opinions. The HOA supporters began to recognize that change didn't have to mean disorder, while those advocating for reforms started appreciating the importance of some structure. This evolution brought about a renewed sense of camaraderie as we all learned to navigate this new chapter together. The incident surrounding my car had not just sparked conflict, it had ignited conversations that allowed us to redefine what it meant to be a community in Maple Grove, a place where every voice mattered and where collaboration could lead us toward a brighter future together. As the dust settled from the upheaval caused by the HOA's actions, a palpable sense of renewal began to sweep through Maple Grove. The town hall meeting had marked a turning point, and with it came the realization that we could reshape our neighborhood into something more inclusive and vibrant. With newfound unity among residents, we embarked on a journey to address issues that the HOA had often overlooked. I took the lead in organizing community workshops focused on enhancing our shared spaces. One of the first initiatives was revitalizing the neglected park at the center of our neighborhood. Overgrown weeds and faded playground equipment had long rendered it an uninviting space. I rallied a group of enthusiastic neighbors, and together we brainstormed ideas for improvement. We decided to host a community cleanup day where residents would come together to clear debris, plant flowers, and repaint benches. On that sunny Saturday morning, families arrived with gloves, rakes, and plenty of enthusiasm. Children laughed as they ran around, while adults worked side by side, sharing stories and forming bonds as they transformed the park into a welcoming gathering place. By the end of the day, not only had we beautified our surroundings, but we had also fostered a sense of ownership and pride among residents. With momentum building, we turned our attention to other issues that had previously been sidelined by the HOA's rigid focus on rules. We initiated discussions about creating community events, potlucks, movie nights in the park, and seasonal festivals that would strengthen neighborly connections. These gatherings allowed residents to mingle in a relaxed atmosphere, forging friendships that transcended previous divides. In parallel with these activities, I began advocating for policy changes within the HOA itself. Armed with insights gathered from our workshops and discussions, I proposed amendments to bylaws that would promote transparency and encourage resident participation in decision-making processes. The board was initially hesitant, but as they witnessed the enthusiasm of our community efforts, they began to recognize the benefits of inclusivity. One significant change was implementing regular open forums where residents could voice their concerns and suggestions directly to HOA representatives without fear of reprimand. This shift encouraged constructive dialogue and helped rebuild trust between residents and the association. As these initiatives took root, it became evident that Maple Grove was evolving into a more cohesive community. Neighbors who once felt isolated or disillusioned began to take pride in their surroundings and actively contribute to its betterment. The transformation was visible not just in our physical spaces but also in how people interacted with one another. There was a renewed spirit of collaboration and mutual respect. No longer defined by strict regulations or fear of penalties, Maple Grove was flourishing into a vibrant neighborhood where everyone felt valued and engaged. The changes we embraced marked the dawn of a new era, one characterized by empowerment, unity, and a shared commitment to nurturing our home together. As I looked around at my fellow residents enjoying the park we had revitalized, a space once neglected, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for how far we had come as a community. Together, we were not just reclaiming our neighborhood, we were redefining it for future generations. As I reflected on the tumultuous journey that had unfolded in Maple Grove, it became clear that the events surrounding the HOA's attempt to impound my car were about far more than just an isolated incident. This experience taught me invaluable lessons about power, ownership, community, and the responsibilities that come with both. First and foremost, I learned that power is not merely a privilege, it is a responsibility. When I discovered my ownership of the neighborhood, I initially felt a sense of pride and authority. However, that feeling quickly transformed into a realization that with power came the obligation to ensure it was used for the greater good. I understood that my position allowed me to influence change, but it also required me to listen, to consider the voices and concerns of my neighbors who had felt unheard for so long. Ownership also took on a deeper meaning. It was no longer just about property deeds or financial investments, it was about fostering a sense of belonging and commitment to our shared environment. As I engaged with my neighbors and took steps to improve our community, I recognized that true ownership extends beyond physical assets. It encompasses emotional investment in the well-being of those around us. I found joy in creating spaces where everyone felt welcome and valued, transforming our neighborhood into a true community. The importance of community emerged as another central lesson. Before this conflict arose, many residents lived parallel lives, coming and going without truly connecting with one another. The incident acted as a catalyst for change, pushing us to confront our fears and work together toward a common goal. We learned that by standing united, we could challenge outdated systems and create an environment where everyone had a voice. This newfound sense of solidarity reminded us that we are stronger together than we are apart. Perhaps one of the most profound changes was within myself. The confrontation with the HOA awakened a sense of courage and resilience I didn't know I possessed. I transitioned from being a compliant homeowner to an advocate for change, a role that allowed me to embrace my leadership potential while remaining grounded in humility. Navigating through conflicts and fostering dialogue among diverse perspectives taught me the value of empathy and understanding. As I watched our community flourish, I marveled at how far we had come together. The lessons learned weren't just personal, they resonated throughout Maple Grove as we collectively embraced accountability and collaboration. Our experiences illuminated the importance of actively participating in our governance rather than leaving it solely to others. In the end, what began as a struggle over an impounded car transformed into a profound journey of growth both for me and for my neighbors. We emerged from this experience not only as better individuals but as a more unified community prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead, armed with the knowledge that together we could shape our neighborhood's future in meaningful ways. The road ahead would be filled with opportunities for continued growth, but now we approached it with confidence and purpose, ready to embrace whatever came next. As the dust settled on the turbulent events that unfolded in Maple Grove, a sense of resolution emerged from what had once felt like an overwhelming conflict. The confrontation with the HOA had sparked waves of change, ultimately leading to a reevaluation of its role within our community. Through open dialogue and shared experiences, we were able to reshape the relationship between residents and the association, moving from a model of strict enforcement to one rooted in collaboration and mutual respect. The HOA board, recognizing the shifting tide of community sentiment, began to embrace new practices that reflected the desires and needs of residents. Together, we established regular forums where homeowners could voice their concerns and contribute ideas for improvement. This newfound transparency fostered trust, allowing us to work together toward common goals rather than viewing each other as adversaries. We transformed the board from a body perceived as controlling into a collaborative partner in our community's evolution. One of the most significant outcomes was the creation of a community advisory committee composed of residents from diverse backgrounds who brought their unique perspectives to the table. This committee played a vital role in advising the HOA on policies that would better serve our neighborhood while ensuring that all voices were heard. As these changes took root, I could see the empowerment spreading throughout Maple Grove. A community that once felt fragmented was now working cohesively toward a brighter future. Looking ahead, my vision for Maple Grove is one where every resident feels not just like an occupant but an integral part of a thriving community. I envision a place where participation is encouraged, where neighbors support one another, and where we celebrate our differences while united by our shared goal of creating a welcoming environment for everyone. The lessons learned through this journey have reinforced the belief that active involvement is essential. When we engage with one another and advocate for positive change, we can create an atmosphere that fosters growth and connection. Furthermore, I hope to establish ongoing community initiatives focused on sustainability, inclusivity, and education programs that will not only improve our neighborhood but also inspire future generations to take pride in their home. By nurturing this culture of engagement, we can ensure that Maple Grove remains a vibrant and dynamic place for years to come. In conclusion, what began as a struggle over an impounded car evolved into a catalyst for transformation, a journey that illuminated the power of community involvement and empowerment. Together, we have reshaped not only our neighborhood's governance but also each other's lives. As we continue this path forward, I am filled with hope and excitement for what lies ahead. Maple Grove is no longer just a collection of houses, it is a united community ready to embrace its potential and face any challenges with strength and resilience.